The snow was falling gently outside the penthouse windows, covering the Manhattan skyline in a quiet, deceptive peace. Inside, warmth flickered from a fireplace trimmed in marble, stockings hung perfectly in a row, and the scent of cinnamon and fir filled the air. It was Christmas Eve. Supposed to be magical, intimate, sacred, but not tonight. Ava Sullivan sat across from her husband at the glass dining table that had seen 1,000 shared meals, laughter, arguments, and silent mornings. Tonight, it bore witness to something else: a pen, a set of divorce papers, and a silence so sharp it could slice skin. Derek Sullivan didn't even look up from his phone. "It's all there. My lawyer reviewed it twice," he said casually, as if confirming a dinner reservation. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why the woman who'd built his life, carried his child, and stood beside him for 6 years was now being tossed out like yesterday's press release. Instead, Ava picked up the Mont Blanc pen he'd once gifted her for their anniversary, engraved with "To My Forever, D," and signed, one stroke at a time. Neat, precise, silent. Derek finally looked up, blinking as if surprised she wasn't protesting. No questions, no last words. Ava stood. Her black coat hugged her now 6 months pregnant frame. "No," she said, voice calm like snow before an avalanche. "But thank you for confirming everything I needed to know." She left the signed papers on the table, walked to the elevator, and hit the button. Ding. The doors opened, and there it was waiting at the curb like a scene from a different life. A black Mercedes S-Class. Engine humming. Rear door held open by a chauffeur in gloves. Inside, a man sat in shadow, only his silhouette visible against the warm lights of Fifth Avenue. He looked up just once as Ava stepped in, his face still unreadable, but his presence spoke volumes. Julian Ward, the reclusive billionaire. The one Derek had always been jealous of, though he'd never admitted it. The man Ava hadn't seen in 10 years. Until tonight. The door shut with a soft click. No goodbye, no tears. Just the quiet power of a woman who had reached her limit and chose herself. As the limo glided into Manhattan's frozen night, Ava didn't look back once. Not at the penthouse. Not at the life she was leaving behind. Because what Derek didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ava Sullivan wasn't broken. She was finally free. And she wasn't just walking away. She was about to rise. Before she was the woman who walked away in a billionaire's limo. Ava Sullivan was just Ava Martin, an ambitious girl from Pennsylvania with calloused hands, an eye for beauty, and a dream of building spaces that felt like home. She wasn't born into privilege. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother worked nights cleaning offices in downtown Scranton. Money was always tight, but love wasn't. Every birthday cake was homemade. Every Christmas ornament hand-painted. Ava grew up believing that hard work and kindness could get you anywhere. That people meant what they said. That loyalty mattered. She was the first in her family to attend college. A full scholarship took her to Parsons School of Design in New York, where she spent 4 years drowning in textbooks, surviving on coffee and instant noodles, and sketching floor plans under flickering dorm lights. She had a gift, turning the dullest room into something warm, personal, unforgettable. Professors noticed. Clients followed. By 26, she had a growing interior design business and an apartment in Brooklyn, so tiny she could touch both walls at once, but it was hers. That's when she met Derek. He walked into her showroom looking for ideas for a corporate project. Tall, poised, Armani clad with a Rolex that shimmered under showroom lights. He was everything she thought she wasn't. Sophisticated, confident, untouchable. But then he smiled, easy, warm, practiced, and asked her if she believed in love at first floor plan. 6 months later, they were married. At first, life with Derek was like living inside a snow globe. Lavish dinners at the River Cafe, getaways to the Hamptons, a Tiffany bracelet for her birthday. And slowly, Ava's independent world began to blur. She closed her own studio, moved into his penthouse, and took on design projects for his company. "You don't need the stress," he said when she hesitated. "Let me take care of you." And for a while, she believed that was love. But love isn't controlling bank accounts. Love isn't tracking every dollar she spends. Love isn't silencing dreams with luxury. Derek turned from charming husband to polished stranger, criticizing her weight, her work, her fragile emotions, her morning sickness. He never hit her, but he didn't need to. His silence stung more than fists ever could. She cried in the shower, where he couldn't see. Stared at the positive pregnancy test with trembling hands, wondering if this would fix everything. It didn't. It only made her invisible, and when she told him she was pregnant, Derek's first words weren't joy, or surprise, or even concern. They were, "You'll need to sign the updated prenup before this goes public." That was the moment something inside Ava cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like the surface of ice before it shatters. And, beneath that crack, something stronger stirred. For weeks, she prepared. Quietly. Methodically. Reached out to old contacts. Pulled money from hidden savings. Bought a burner phone. She didn't tell a soul, not even her best friend from college. Because if there's one thing Ava had learned in the last 6 months, it was this. No one was coming to save her. So she would save herself. And when Christmas Eve came, and she signed those papers with a smile, it wasn't weakness. It was power, finally reclaimed. Because Ava Martin Sullivan was no longer anyone's property. She was the architect of her own escape. The penthouse on Park Avenue was everything a luxury lifestyle magazine would salivate over. It stretched across the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline like a painting. The living room was a symphony of neutral tones, cream Italian leather, dark wood floors, and curated art pieces sourced from overpriced galleries in Soho. A Mont Blanc pen rested beside a Cartier clock on the marble console. Everything screamed wealth. Everything whispered control. Ava had helped design it. She'd chosen the velvet throw pillows, the sculptural lighting fixtures, the custom-built bookcases that Derek never filled with books. She had poured love into every corner, thinking it would make their home warmer, more human. But over time, the space began to feel more like a showroom than a sanctuary. Cold. Perfect. Soulless. And that, in many ways, mirrored their marriage. The kitchen had state-of-the-art appliances Ava barely touched. Derek preferred takeout from Michelin-starred spots, or dinner parties hosted by his investor friends. He would bring her to charity galas at the Plaza Hotel or black-tie fundraisers at the Met, but always introduced her as his wife, with a nod, not a touch. She learned to smile for photos, to accept air kisses from women who looked through her, and to sit silently while business was discussed over Dom Perignon and steak tartare. Their bedroom, once the heart of their intimacy, had turned into a luxury prison. His side of the bed remained cold even when he was home. The walk-in closet lined with Dior, Givenchy, and Louboutin looked like a department store, but none of it felt like hers anymore. Even her body, changing with the pregnancy, felt like something she had to hide beneath designer silk. The penthouse was silent most days. Derek worked late, traveled often, and when he was home, he buried himself in his office, glass-walled and positioned at the far end of the apartment, like a watchtower. Ava could hear the muffled calls, the laughter, the flirtatious tone when he spoke to Trixie, the woman who, Ava later discovered, wasn't just a marketing consultant. Still, she played her part. She sat in the private lounge of their building, sipping Starbucks lattes with polite neighbors. She attended holiday events on the rooftop garden, its panoramic views of Central Park often blurring with her quiet tears. No one noticed. Or maybe no one cared. Christmas at the penthouse was particularly ironic. A massive tree stood by the windows, professionally decorated with gold and white ornaments. A staff of decorators had put it up the week before. As Ava watched from the couch, a mug of cocoa untouched in her hands. There were no gifts beneath it, only boxes wrapped in Dior ribbon, empty and staged for effect. A metaphor, she thought bitterly, for the life she was living. But perhaps the most haunting space was the nursery. It was Derek's idea, or so he claimed. He'd hired a luxury design team to build it out the moment Ava told him about the baby. It had custom wallpaper, a crib imported from Italy, and a rocking chair that had never been used. Ava had stood in that room one night, rubbing her belly, realizing that not a single item in it had been chosen by her. She didn't belong there anymore. That was the truth. So, when she stepped into Julian's limousine that night and left the penthouse behind, it wasn't just a dramatic exit. It was a woman walking away from a life that looked perfect but was built entirely on pretense. Derek Sullivan was the kind of man people instinctively trusted. Sharp jawline, tailored suits, that disarming smile. He had the effortless charisma of someone born for corner offices and boardroom deals. He knew everyone's name at the country club, tipped generously, and charmed investors over single malt whiskey. On paper, he was the dream, self-made, driven, generous. The media loved him. His colleagues feared him. Women wanted him. But Ava? She knew the man behind the mask. Derek grew up in Connecticut, the son of a failed entrepreneur and a bitter socialite. From an early age, he learned that appearances were everything. His mother used guilt as currency. His father used silence as punishment. Derek adapted. He became what they wanted: successful, impressive, impossible to criticize. But underneath the polished surface was a boy who believed love was transactional and power was safety. When he met Ava, he saw opportunity disguised as affection. She was talented, grounded, warm, the opposite of the cold world he'd come from. And she had something he craved: purity, innocence, a belief in love he'd long abandoned. So he pursued her with everything he had: flowers, attention, promises of partnership. He told her she made him better, that he'd never met someone who saw the world the way she did. But once she said, "I do," something shifted. Derek stopped performing, stopped pretending. He had what he wanted. The charming mask remained in public, but behind closed doors, his tone changed. He became critical. "You're being emotional," replaced "I love you." "Don't overreact," replaced "I'm listening." He started using words like investment and return when talking about their relationship. Then came the control. At first, it was subtle. "Let me handle the money, it's just easier." Then it was, "You don't need to work. My team will give you projects." Then, "Why are you spending so much on prenatal appointments?" Ava's world shrank to the size of Derek's expectations. Every choice required his approval. Every deviation was seen as betrayal. And yet, he still played the perfect husband in public. He posted anniversary tributes on Instagram, bought her designer maternity dresses, gave speeches at charity events praising the strength of the woman behind him. But those words never made it home. At home, he barely touched her. At home, her pregnancy was an inconvenience, an added line on his spreadsheet. And then came Trixie. She was 24, ambitious, and dangerously aware of her beauty. Derek met her at a networking event in LA and flew her back to New York under the pretense of consulting on youth branding. Ava asked once, just once, if something was going on. Derek laughed. Cold. Dismissive. "She's a child, Ava. Don't be paranoid." But the hotel receipts, the perfume lingering on his shirts, and the secret Instagram photos said otherwise. And when Ava found one of Trixie's earrings on their bedroom floor, Derek didn't even bother to lie. He just looked at her, calm and unbothered. "You're pregnant. Emotional. Let's not do this right now." That night, something inside Ava began to die. And Derek? He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He had already mentally moved on. In his mind, Ava was weak, dependent, trapped. But he was wrong, because Derek Sullivan, in all his arrogance, had made one fatal miscalculation. He thought Ava wouldn't survive without him. The invitation came in a black and gold envelope, thick with pretension and power. The Sullivan Group Holiday Gala, December 24th. 7 p.m. Vertical Bar, the Plaza Hotel. Ava stared at it for days before tossing it into the trash. She wasn't invited, Derek had made that clear. But she was expected to smile if the press asked. "Let's keep things classy," he had said, like she was a business liability. He didn't know she'd show up. But she did. Not out of pettiness. Not to start drama. She showed up to say goodbye on her own terms to herself, to that life, to the woman she used to be. The Plaza Hotel was a cathedral of decadence that night. Chandeliers dripping in crystal, champagne flutes clinking in manicured hands, gold accents on every surface. Wall Street's finest political influencers, socialites, and media magnates. The room pulsed with wealth and whispers. Ava stepped inside alone, wearing a simple black maternity gown she'd altered herself. No diamonds, no designer clutch, just her and her unborn child. Eyes turned, some in confusion, others in judgment. She ignored them. Across the ballroom, Derek stood with a glass of bourbon, arm wrapped around a woman half his age. Trixie Monroe. Glittering in red sequins, her laughter sharp as glass. They were standing under the massive holiday chandelier, posing for photos like a campaign couple. Then Derek saw her. For a split second, his smile faltered. Just a flash. Then he leaned in, whispered something to Trixie, and walked toward Ava, his face stretching into a smirk. "What are you doing here?" he asked under his breath. "This isn't a good look." Ava looked at him, calm, steady. "Neither is parading your mistress while your wife's still legally carrying your name and your child." Trixie strutted up beside him, wrapping her arm around his. "You must be Ava," she said, like she'd rehearsed the line in a mirror. "You look brave." It wasn't rage that hit Ava. It wasn't pain. It was something colder, sharper, clarity. All around them, phones were out, cameras clicking, whispers turning to murmurs. The pregnant wife, the new girl, the CEO in the middle, a PR disaster in motion. Derek leaned closer, his voice a growl. "Leave before you embarrass yourself any further." Ava stepped back, took a breath, then said clearly, "I already signed the divorce papers, Derek. Merry Christmas." Gasps. Then she turned and walked through the crowd, head high, her belly a silent defiance to every lie and insult he'd thrown. As she reached the hotel lobby, a familiar figure stepped forward. Julian Ward. In a tailored navy coat, eyes locked on hers not with pity, but with quiet awe. "You good?" he asked gently. Ava nodded. He offered his arm. She took it. Behind them, the ballroom spiraled into chaos, PR reps scrambling, whispers turning into headlines. The scandal was live within the hour. Billionaire CEO's pregnant wife crashes gala, drops divorce bombshell. Ava didn't read the comments. She was done explaining herself. Because in a single moment, the world saw what Derek tried so hard to hide. Ava wasn't weak. She was rising. She held it together until the car door closed. The second the soft click echoed behind her, Ava's breath hitched. The warmth of the Mercedes S-Class cocooned her, but it couldn't keep out the avalanche of pain waiting to crush her. Julian said nothing. He didn't offer a tissue. Didn't tell her to breathe. He just drove, letting the silence speak, letting her fall apart without witnesses. By the time they reached the Hudson apartment, an old, quiet place Julian kept for nights he needed peace, Ava could barely walk. Her heels were off before the elevator reached the third floor. Her coat clung to her like armor she no longer had the strength to wear. He opened the door. The apartment was modest, nothing like Derek's penthouse. Hardwood floors, faded rugs, shelves lined with actual books. It smelled like cedar and old leather. A home, a place untouched by appearances. Ava dropped onto the couch, buried her face in her hands, and finally cried. Not the delicate tears of someone embarrassed. The guttural sobs of someone who had been holding everything for too long. 6 months of gaslighting. Of smiling through rejection. Of pretending her marriage wasn't collapsing. Of whispering to her unborn child in the dark, promising things would get better. And tonight being humiliated in front of the city's elite, while carrying the last piece of that broken love was too much. Julian sat across the room, not intruding, just present. When she finally looked up, mascara streaked and eyes swollen, she whispered, "I thought I was ready." "You were," he said simply. "But it still hurts." Ava curled onto her side, clutching her stomach. "He made me feel like I was insane, like I imagined the coldness, the cheating, like I was broken." Julian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, because there was nothing to fix. Not now. Later that night, she showered. Not to feel clean, nothing could scrub off betrayal, but to feel real. The water was too hot, her skin turning red, but she didn't flinch. She just stood there, hand on her belly, whispering apologies to the baby. "I'm sorry you saw that. I'm sorry this is your beginning." She crawled into bed wearing an oversized t-shirt Julian had folded neatly on the nightstand. It smelled like detergent and memory. As she stared at the ceiling, something inside her shifted. She had survived worse. Losing her mother, working through college, starting a business from nothing. But this being discarded while pregnant, being replaced like she was furniture cut deeper than all of that. And yet, she was still breathing. Still here. Not because she was strong, but because she had no other choice. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Derek's smirk, Trixie's pitying smile, the flash of cameras. But by dawn, something in her gaze had changed. Resolve. The kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from the need to reclaim. To rewrite the narrative. To never be the woman waiting to be chosen again. Because she might have broken that night, but Ava wasn't finished. She was just beginning. It was a week after the gala when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter, cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed, sealed with wax. Ava almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another apology from someone who watched her fall and suddenly wanted to check in. But the name on the return address made her fingers freeze mid-motion. Eleanor Ward, Julian's mother. Ava hadn't seen her in over a decade, not since college. Back then, Eleanor had been a powerful presence. Elegant, intimidating, and fiercely private. She was the type of woman who wore vintage Chanel and quoted The Art of War at dinner. Ava had always felt out of place in her presence. And yet, respected. Seen. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a short, handwritten note. Ava, if you're reading this, then Julian has told you nothing. Typical of him. But perhaps that's for the best. Come to the estate. You deserve to know the truth. About your child. About your mother. About everything. Eleanor. Ava read the letter 3 times, her pulse quickening with each pass. About your mother? That didn't make sense. Her mother died of a stroke when Ava was 16. She had no other family. No lingering ties. Nothing. At least, that's what she believed. She waited until Julian came home that evening. He was quiet as usual. Calm. Respectful. But when she showed him the letter, his face paled. I didn't want to drag you into that world again, he said. What world? She asked, more sharply than intended. Julian hesitated, then finally sat across from her. There's something I never told you. Something I thought I'd buried. He paused. Your mother and mine, they weren't just friends. They were business partners. Quietly. Secretly. They helped build one of the first boutique hotel chains in upstate New York. But when your mom married your father, someone my mother didn't approve of, she sold her shares, or so everyone thought. Ava blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying you still own part of that empire. Through a trust your mother set up before she died. It's been dormant. Hidden. But it's yours. Ava's mind spun. The years of struggling. The nights she couldn't afford groceries in college. The projects she took on for exposure. All while a dormant trust existed? Why wouldn't she tell me? Ava whispered. Julian looked away. I think she wanted to protect you. From what that world would do to you. Ava stood slowly, her hands shaking. And you knew? I suspected, Julian admitted. But I didn't want to reopen old wounds unless you needed it. She wanted to scream, cry, run. But then, she laughed. A single, bitter laugh that cracked through the silence like lightning. So while Derek was cutting me out of every financial decision, I've been sitting on a fortune I didn't know existed. Julian nodded. And it's still there. Untouched. Waiting. Ava stared out the window, the Manhattan skyline glowing in the distance. For the first time in months, the tears that welled in her eyes weren't from sorrow. They were from possibility. Because the game had changed. And this time, she wasn't playing by Derek's rules. She was an heir. A partner. A legacy waiting to be claimed. And soon, the world would remember her name. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were no magical montages, no sudden moments of epiphany under dramatic lighting, just quiet mornings, one after another, where Ava forced herself to get out of bed, to eat, to walk, to remember who she was before Derek, before the cameras, before the breakdown. Julian gave her space. He didn't offer advice. He didn't tell her to move on or cheer up. He simply made sure the fridge was stocked, the door was unlocked, and her name was on the lease. One morning, he left a simple note on the kitchen counter beside a warm croissant and a hot Starbucks coffee. For what's next, Jay? Beneath it sat a silver key. To her own office. Ava stepped into the downtown loft, the next day bare walls, exposed brick, natural light pouring through tall windows. A fresh start, a blank canvas. Her fingers itched at the thought of color palettes and floor plans. But more than that, they tingled with purpose. She wasn't just building a business. She was building herself. With access to the dormant trust her mother left behind and Julian's quiet backing, Ava launched Marrow Interiors. The name wasn't chosen by accident. It symbolized going deep, past the surface, designing from the inside out. She didn't want glamour. She wanted soul. Clients came fast. At first, small boutique hotels upstate, then private residences in the Hamptons. Within weeks, whispers began circling in design circles. "Isn't that Derek Sullivan's ex?" Followed by, "She's actually brilliant." Ava didn't respond. She let her work speak. She updated her wardrobe not with glitz, but power. Structured coats, clean lines, a Mont Blanc pen clipped to her leather planner. No labels shouting for attention. Just presence, poise, a different kind of wealth, the kind you didn't need to perform. Her body changed too. The baby was growing fast, strong. Each movement reminded her that she wasn't doing this alone. Every heartbeat at her doctor's appointment became a drumbeat in her chest. Keep going, keep building. But perhaps the most powerful moment came one rainy Tuesday morning. Ava stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting a sleek black dress that hugged her pregnant belly with quiet elegance. She touched her reflection lightly, reverently. This body, once ridiculed by Derek, now carried life and power. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't apologizing. She was ready. That afternoon, she walked into a design panel at the plaza, yes, that plaza where Derek's firm had just submitted a proposal. He didn't know she'd be a guest judge. He nearly choked when he saw her. Hair swept into a clean bun. Minimal makeup. Diamond studs. A simple Cartier watch on her wrist. Confidence dripping from every step. "Miss Sullivan," one of the panelists said. "Glad you could join us." Ava smiled. "It's just Ava now." She took her seat center of the table and opened her folder. Derek floundered through his pitch. Ava never interrupted, never smirked. She didn't need to. When it was over, she leaned forward slightly and said, "Thank you, we'll be in touch." No drama, no spectacle, just grace and quiet domination. Because her comeback wasn't about revenge, it was about returning to herself. And as she walked out of that room, the whispers weren't about the scandal anymore. They were about the storm she was becoming. The Sullivan Group's annual spring summit was the pinnacle of its calendar year. Held at the iconic Cipriani on Wall Street, it was where partnerships were solidified, major investors were wooed, and the CEO, Derek, delivered his carefully curated vision speech. Media outlets were invited, stockholders flown in. It was the perfect place to control the narrative. And Derek thought he had it all under control. He had spent weeks rehearsing in front of mirrors, practicing the cadence of his speech. Trixie was still on his arm, less shiny now, more desperate. But Derek didn't care. The headlines had faded. Ava had gone quiet. That meant he had won. He had no idea what was coming. Ava arrived alone. No entourage, no theatrics, just presence. A sleek white maternity suit hugged her form with understated power. Her hair fell in soft waves, a subtle nod to softness beneath the steel. On her wrist, a Mont Blanc pen clipped neatly beside a leather-bound notebook. On her face, calm. She didn't enter through the main floor. She took the back elevator straight to the mezzanine where the board members waited. Because Ava wasn't a guest. She was now a stakeholder. 3 weeks prior, she'd used part of her inheritance to acquire a minority interest in one of the Sullivan Group's largest partners, a design firm that supplied their luxury properties. Quietly, legally, brilliantly. It gave her access, leverage, a seat at the table Derek had tried to erase her from. The board meeting began. Derek breezed in, confident, oblivious. Then he saw her. He froze for just a moment, but it was enough. The board members followed his gaze. Murmurs started. A few eyes widened. One man, older, British, with a reputation for never smiling, actually smirked. Ava didn't look at Derek. She addressed the room. "I'd like to open with a proposal," she said, placing her folder on the table. A revision to the current brand partnership agreement. She laid out figures, trends, design plans that dwarfed Derek's existing projects. Elegant, visionary, profitable. Then she paused. Also, I believe it's time the board consider re-evaluating executive leadership in light of internal ethics violations. That's when she handed over the USB drive. Inside, email chains, flagged transactions, and a trail of financial manipulations Derek thought he'd hidden. He had funneled company funds into personal real estate ventures under Trixie's name moves. Ava had uncovered while reviewing old legal files. The room went silent. Derek stood, fists clenched. This is a setup. So, Ava finally looked him in the eye. No, Derek. This is what accountability looks like. He turned to the board, scrambling for words. But they weren't listening anymore, because Ava hadn't come for revenge. She came for justice. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to gloat. She simply showed them who he really was, and reminded them who she had always been. The vote came quickly. Derek was suspended pending investigation. Trixie slipped out before dessert was served. Ava didn't stay for the fallout. She stepped into the spring air, hand resting on her growing belly, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because he was falling, but because she was finally standing tall, and the whole world had watched her do it with grace, precision, and unstoppable power. Spring in Manhattan had always felt rushed, like even the cherry blossoms had a deadline. But this year, it felt slower, softer, warmer. Ava walked through Central Park, the soft rhythm of her footsteps grounding her in the present. She wasn't hiding anymore. No more looking over her shoulder, no more pretending. She was free. The media storm had faded. Derek was under investigation, his name now attached to lawsuits, not success. Investors had pulled out. Trixie had disappeared from social feeds. The empire he'd tried to build on appearances was collapsing under its own weight. Ava never gave another interview. She let silence speak. Instead, she focused on what mattered. Preparing for the baby. Setting up her studio. Taking long walks. Reading books she'd once ignored on nightstands. Women Who Run with the Wolves. The 48 Laws of Power. Journals filled with late-night thoughts and early-morning ideas now cluttered her new apartment in Soho, next to baby clothes folded with quiet joy. One afternoon, she stood before a full-length mirror, holding her phone to her belly. "Hi," she whispered into the camera, smiling. "You don't know this yet, but you saved me." She paused. "I thought I was broken. That being left meant I was less. That being pregnant and alone meant I had failed. But I wasn't broken. I was just buried, under someone else's version of who I should be." She looked into the camera, not just at her reflection, but at every woman who'd been where she had once stood. "I didn't walk away because I stopped loving him. I walked away because I started loving me." The video wasn't planned. But when she posted it, something happened. It went viral. Not because of scandal, but because of truth. Because millions of women saw themselves in Ava's pain and her silence, her strength, her quiet rebellion. Comments poured in, from mothers, from daughters, from strangers in different time zones who whispered, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." And just like that, Ava Sullivan became more than a headline. She became a voice. Months later, on a bright June morning, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. No entourage, no private suite, just her, Julian in the waiting room, and the soft cries of new life breaking into the world. She named him Leo. "Lion," she whispered, holding him close. "Because we survived." Julian visited the next day. He brought flowers and silence, the kind that always made Ava feel safe. "I'm not broken anymore," she told him quietly. "I never thought you were," he replied. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. Respect. A foundation. She didn't need a man to save her, but it felt good to be seen. Months passed. Marrow Interiors expanded. Ava wrote a book, spoke at conferences, built homes for women fleeing abusive relationships. Her pain had become her purpose not by force, but by choice. And every time someone asked her how she did it, she smiled and said, "I didn't rise because I had no fear. I rose because I loved myself more than I feared losing him. Because Ava's story wasn't about Derek. It was about every woman who'd ever been silenced, shamed, left, and chose to rise anyway. 6 months had passed since Ava's story went viral. Her face was no longer just on design magazines, but on billboards for empowerment summits and covers of best-selling memoirs. Marrow Interiors was expanding beyond New York clients in Chicago, San Francisco, even overseas. Her son, Leo, was growing fast, with his mother's calm eyes and his father's jawline. Not that she ever mentioned Derek anymore. Life was calm, until a phone call shattered that calm at 7:43 a.m. on a Monday. She was feeding Leo in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows, when her assistant's number popped up. "Ava, I thought you should know. Derek's back in the city." 1. Her grip tightened around the bottle. "He's filing a countersuit." The assistant continued, hesitating. "He's claiming your trust fund was part of marital assets, and he wants half." Ava stood silent for a beat, the only sound in the room the gentle suckle of her son's breathing. Half. After everything. After the lies, the public affair, the financial abuse, he wanted half of what her mother built, of what she rebuilt. Julian arrived 10 minutes later. Not because she called him, but because he knew. He always knew. "He's desperate," Julian said. "You shook the foundation he built his identity on. Now he's grasping at whatever he can." But this time, Ava didn't cry. She didn't shake. She called her lawyer. "I want this handled publicly," she said. "I want every piece of his paperwork reviewed under a microscope. If he wants to come after me, he can walk through fire to try." That week, the headlines came back. Derek Sullivan strikes back. Billionaire CEO alleges former wife hid assets. From power couple to courtroom battle, the Ava and Derek wore resumes. But Ava didn't flinch. She stepped into court wearing a navy blue power suit, hair slicked back, no makeup but a bold lip. She wasn't the woman who signed divorce papers with shaking hands. She was a mother, a businesswoman, a survivor. Derek looked different now. Thinner, edgier. The press wasn't flattering anymore. Investors had turned their backs. Trixie had vanished. And when the judge asked him to explain his belief that Ava's trust belonged to him, his words faltered. Because there was no paperwork, no legal trail, no proof. Just ego. And desperation. Ava didn't need to speak. Her legal team shredded his claims with elegance. Facts. Dates. Evidence. Her mother's intent was clear. Her separation of assets was airtight. The courtroom fell silent when the judge ruled. All claims dismissed. Full ownership of the trust and its assets remain with the respondent, Ava Sullivan. Derek didn't even look at her as he left. And Ava? She stood, shook her attorney's hand, and walked out of that courtroom not in triumph but in peace. Later that night, she rocked Leo to sleep, his tiny hand curled around her finger. The city lights blinked beyond the window, silent witnesses to her journey. Julian texted her one sentence. "It's done, he's gone." She didn't reply. She simply held her son tighter, because the past had tried to pull her back one last time. And she had stood tall, not with rage, not with revenge, but with unshakable resolve. It started with laughter. Not the kind that came from a joke or a punchline. The kind that slips out when you forget for a second that life has ever hurt you. Ava had just finished feeding Leo when Julian dropped a bottle of formula on the floor of the nursery. It splattered everywhere, on the crib, the rug, even Leo's forehead. For a moment, Ava just stood there in shock. Then Leo sneezed, milk flying from his tiny nose. And Ava laughed. Really laughed. Julian stared at her shirt soaked, face helpless, and said, "I'm just trying to be helpful." She wiped a tear from her cheek, still grinning. "You're terrible with babies." "Noted," he said, holding up his hands in surrender. But he didn't leave. He stayed. Cleaned the rug. Held Leo while Ava ran a quick load of laundry. Made her tea while she sat on the couch, still in her robe, hair a mess, heart a little lighter. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. He started coming by more often, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. Sunday morning pancakes. Midweek baby check-ins. Emails sent late at night that ended with, "Let me know if you need anything." And for the first time in years, Ava didn't feel like she needed to be anyone but herself. One evening, as she stood on the balcony with a glass of ginger tea, watching the city flicker beneath her, Julian joined her. No words, just presence. "You know," he said quietly, "I always wondered what it would have been like if I'd told you back then." She turned. "Told me what?" He smiled, sheepish. "That I liked you, a lot, even before Derek. But you were always so focused, so out of reach." Ava looked down at her tea, her heart skipping once. "I thought about you sometimes," she admitted. "During the bad months. I used to wonder how different things might have been." Julian didn't move closer, didn't make a move. He just nodded. "Well, maybe now we get to find out." She didn't reply, because something softer than excitement stirred in her chest. Safety. That night, after Leo was asleep, she sat in her studio and stared at a blank canvas she kept for moments like this. Moments where emotion couldn't be written, it had to be sketched. She drew him. Not perfectly. Not romantically. Just, honestly, his soft jawline. The glasses he always pushed up when he was thinking. The crease in his brow when he was trying not to care too much. When she was done, she titled it simply, Possibility. Because that's what he was. Not a rescue. Not a replacement. Just a possibility. And in a world where she had once felt like love was a trap, that simple truth felt like a miracle. Over the weeks that followed, their rhythm found a beat. It wasn't fireworks, it was gentle, real. The way he kissed her forehead before leaving. The way he always asked before holding Leo. The way he never tried to fill the space Derek had destroyed but built new space beside it. One afternoon, as they sat together watching Leo sleep, Julian reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. She didn't need to rush. Because love had finally come to her. Not with noise, but with peace. And this time, she knew she was ready. It was a Tuesday morning when Ava realized she no longer flinched at the sound of her phone ringing. There was a time when every buzz sent her heart racing, waiting for a cruel text, a headline, a demand disguised as concern. But now, the screen lit up with a different kind of life. Project updates, new client inquiries, a group chat with single moms she met at a local parenting class. Julian checking in with a picture of Leo, mid-giggle. Her world had changed. Not with grand declarations, but with steady brickwork, each small decision laying the foundation of the life she'd always deserved. Marrow Interiors had moved into its permanent space. A sunlit corner studio in Tribeca, complete with exposed beams, open desks, and a hand-painted sign above the door that read, Design from Within. She hired a small, diverse team, women and men who understood that beauty wasn't about luxury, but about meaning. Their first major solo project was a healing center for domestic abuse survivors in Brooklyn. Ava attended the ribbon cutting with Leo on her hip. When a journalist asked her how it felt, she didn't talk about business. She said, "We don't build to impress. We build to hold people. Because everyone deserves to feel safe in their own story." It was a headline the internet clung to. That afternoon, Ava received over 3,000 DMs from strangers who had never heard of her before the scandal but now followed her journey like family. Many were women, many were survivors, and many had no words, just emojis of hearts, lions, and phoenixes. Her studio wall soon filled with letters and art from people she'd inspired, but Ava never saw herself as a symbol. She was just a woman who refused to stay broken. At home, life was calm, predictable in the best way. Mornings started with Leo babbling in his crib and sunlight spilling over coffee mugs. Julian visited often, sometimes staying late, sometimes not, but always asking, never assuming. There was no title for what they were yet, and Ava loved that. Love without pressure. Connection without obligation. Just respect, kindness, and laughter. One day, Julian found a sketch in her notebook, plans for a small guest cottage beside her future home. When he looked up, she just smiled. "It's not for you," she joked. "It's for peace." He laughed, but she saw the warmth in his eyes, the understanding. A few months later, Ava bought a small piece of land in upstate New York, far from the flashing lights, but close enough to the city if she ever missed it. It was quiet, wooded, the kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts, and maybe heal a little deeper. She didn't move immediately, but just knowing it was hers, meant everything. Because this time, the walls she was building weren't to protect her from the world. They were to welcome the future in. Her own sanctuary. Designed by her, for her, and the life she was creating. No gold chandeliers. No grand entrances. Just warm light, soft laughter, and the sound of her baby breathing peacefully at night. Ava hadn't just rebuilt her life. She'd rewritten the blueprint. And this time, every room had her name on it. The day Julian said, "I love you," wasn't candlelit or dramatic. It happened on a Tuesday, as Ava was struggling to fold Leo's stroller outside the pediatrician's office in the pouring rain. Her hair was soaked, Leo was screaming, and one of her heels had snapped. Julian, arriving late from a meeting, rushed over, grabbed the stroller, and wrestled it into the trunk without a word. Then, as he helped her into the car and fastened Leo's carrier, he looked up, his hair dripping onto his shirt, and said it plain, like a fact. "I love you." Ava blinked. She wasn't shocked he felt it, but that he said it without expectation, without grand gestures, sent a jolt through her. He didn't say it to fix anything. He just wanted her to know, and that made it scarier. Later that night, as Leo slept in his crib, Ava stood at the kitchen window, watching the city glow beneath the rain. Julian had gone home after dinner. He didn't press her for a response. He simply kissed her forehead and whispered, "Take all the time you need." But time wasn't the issue. The issue was trust. It wasn't about Julian's past, it was about hers. About giving someone the power to hurt you again, even when they've shown every sign they won't. About unlearning years of self-defense mechanisms that had kept her alive. The next morning, she met her therapist for their usual Thursday session. Ava hadn't missed a single appointment since Leo was born. "He said he loves me," she told her calmly, voice low. "And how does that feel?" the therapist asked. "Like I'm standing on a cliff, and the view is beautiful. But I've already fallen before." The therapist nodded. "It's okay to be scared. But love isn't a cliff anymore, Ava. You're not falling, you're choosing." That night, Julian came over with Thai takeout and Leo's favorite pacifier he'd accidentally taken home. They didn't talk about the words, but Ava watched him as he cleaned up after dinner, holding Leo in one arm while loading the dishwasher with the other. No drama, no need for credit, just presence. And maybe that's what changed everything. A week later, she invited him on a trip. Just the three of them. A small rental cabin in the Berkshires. Wood stove. Trees rustling outside. Leo babbling in the background as snow gently fell. There, in the quiet, she whispered, "I don't know if I'll ever love fearlessly again. But I think I love you. In my own way. And that has to be enough right now." Julian didn't ask for more. He just smiled, leaned forward, and said, "That's everything." For the first time in her life, Ava realized love didn't have to be loud to be strong. It could be patient. It could be safe. It could look like a man warming baby bottles at 2 a.m. and whispering to a child who wasn't his yet somehow already was. And in that moment, Ava didn't feel tested. She felt chosen. By peace, by healing, and finally, by a man who didn't just love her story, but helped her rewrite it. It was a Thursday morning when Julian asked. No ring, no big speech, no bending down on one knee. They were in the kitchen, Ava wearing Leo in a sling while flipping blueberry pancakes. Julian stood beside her, trying to peel an orange with zero success, and laughing at his own mess. Then, in the middle of all that softness, he said, "Would you marry me?" Ava paused, spatula in hand, heart stumbling. He wasn't joking. Julian turned to her, hands sticky with citrus, his expression serious, but kind. "I know you weren't waiting for this. I know you don't need it to be whole. But I want to do life with you. With him. Officially. As family." She didn't cry. She just smiled slow, sure, full of quiet joy. "I don't want a wedding," she said. "Not like before. I don't want to perform anything." Julian nodded. "Then we don't perform." And they didn't. They married 6 weeks later in the garden of the small cottage she'd purchased upstate, the one with tall trees, a fire pit, and a swing she'd tied to the old oak herself. Leo wore a tiny navy onesie with ring bearer stitched across the back. The guests were few. Her team from Marrow, her therapist, a couple of neighbors who had become unexpected friends, and Eleanor Ward, elegant, observant, softer now than Ava remembered. Julian wore a crisp white shirt and no tie. Ava wore a simple ivory dress she found at a vintage shop in Brooklyn. No veil. No heels. Just bare feet in the grass and sunlight on her skin. There was no aisle. No music. Just the rustle of trees and the sound of laughter as Ava walked toward him with Leo on her hip. They wrote their own vows short, imperfect, honest. "I don't promise to be perfect," Julian said, voice trembling. "I just promise to stay. I don't promise to forget the past," Ava whispered. "But I promise to keep choosing you over fear, over doubt, over silence." When they kissed, Leo clapped in confusion, and everyone laughed. The reception was a picnic. Homemade lemonade. String lights. A record player spinning old jazz. No photographers. No filters. But the photos Eleanor took on her iPhone, candid, blurry, glowing, captured something better than any magazine cover ever could. Love that looked like home. Later that night, as the last guests left, and Leo slept in a crib tucked inside the guest room, Ava and Julian sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the fireflies dance over the grass. "I still can't believe this is my life," she whispered. Julian kissed her temple. "It's yours. And you built it." And she had. She'd built it from ashes and tears. From broken promises and reborn dreams. From a moment on Christmas Eve when she walked away with nothing and chose herself. She once thought weddings were about spectacle, but tonight proved otherwise. Because the most powerful commitment wasn't made in a ballroom or written in gold, it was made in the quiet, between two people who had survived. And chosen love anyway. She wrote it on a quiet Sunday morning, long before the world woke up. Leo was still asleep in his crib. Julian was making coffee downstairs. The house was filled with the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread, the kind of peace that once felt impossible. Ava sat by the window, her journal open, pen in hand. Not for notes, not for to-do lists. For her, or rather for the girl she used to be. She titled it simply, "To the Woman I Was." You don't know it yet, but you're going to survive. You're going to walk through fire, through betrayal, through silence so loud it feels like it might break you. But you won't break. You'll bend. You'll scream into pillows. You'll wonder if you're crazy. You'll ask yourself why love looks so much like punishment. And still you'll rise. She paused, breathing deeply, remembering. The younger version of her, freshly married, hungry for approval, desperate to keep everything looking perfect while her world quietly unraveled. You'll love someone who doesn't know how to love you back. He'll smile for cameras and kiss you in public. But behind closed doors, he'll erase you piece by piece. You'll give too much. Apologize for things that weren't your fault. Shrink to make space for someone who never deserved the room. But here's the miracle. One day, you'll leave. Her hand trembled slightly, but she kept writing. Not because someone saves you. Because you remember you're worth saving. You'll sign those papers, with a smile. And you'll walk out into a storm that tries to swallow you whole. But it won't. You'll cry in quiet apartments, and learn to hold your baby with one hand, and your broken heart with the other. You'll think no one sees you. But one man will. And he won't rescue you. He'll wait for you to rescue yourself. And when you do, he'll stand beside you, not in front, not behind. Beside. She could feel tears forming now, but they weren't sad. They were soft. Healing. You'll build a company, a home, a life. Not perfect. But yours. You'll find joy in slow mornings, strength in quiet choices. And one day, your son will call you mama, and that word will sound like a second chance. She stopped. Looked out at the yard where flowers she planted were finally blooming. She thought of all the women who needed this letter, who were still in the dark rooms, still believing they had to earn love by suffering. So to you, and to them, I say, you are not too much. You are not too loud, too soft, too late. You are not broken. You are just beginning. She signed it. Love, Ava. She folded the page, slipped it into the back of her journal, and closed it gently. Julian entered the room then, holding 2 mugs. He didn't ask what she'd written. He didn't need to. She looked at him, smiled, and said, "Let's wake up the baby." Because today was not for the past. It was for the woman she'd become and the life she finally chose to live out loud. It happened on a rainy Saturday afternoon, just after Leo's 6th birthday. They had spent the morning baking cupcakes, his favorite, vanilla with rainbow sprinkles, and watching old Pixar movies in pajamas. The kind of soft, slow day that Ava cherished most. She was folding laundry when he wandered into the room, cradling a worn photo album, the one she had hidden for years. "Mom," he said, voice small but clear, "is this my dad?" Her heart skipped. She looked up to see him pointing to a photo she hadn't touched in forever, one from her wedding. She was smiling. Derek's hand was around her waist. To anyone else, it looked like a perfect couple. To her, it felt like a ghost. She set the towel down slowly and joined him on the couch. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's him." Leo studied the picture. "Why don't I know him?" Ava didn't panic. She didn't lie. She took a breath. "Because he wasn't ready to be a dad. And I didn't want you growing up around someone who didn't know how to love the right way." Leo's brow furrowed. "Did he not love me?" She cupped his cheek, gently turning his face toward her. "He didn't get to know you, but if he had, he would have loved you. Because you're the easiest person to love in the world." That seemed to land somewhere inside him. He nodded, then asked what all children eventually ask. "Was he mean to you?" Ava didn't flinch. "Sometimes." Silence hung for a beat. Then Leo asked, "Why'd you marry him?" She smiled, not sadly but knowingly. "Because I didn't know then what I know now. Sometimes, people look good on the outside, but they hurt you on the inside. And when that happens, you have to be brave enough to walk away." He thought about that for a moment, then looked up. "You were brave." A lump formed in her throat. "I tried to be," she whispered. He laid his head on her shoulder. "I'm glad you picked Julian." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Me too." Julian had never tried to replace Derek. He never insisted on being called Dad. He just showed up at every game, every birthday, every sleepless night, and Leo knew that. Love, after all, isn't about titles. It's about presence. Later that night, after Leo was asleep, Ava found Julian in the kitchen, rinsing out mugs. He asked about Derek. She said quietly. Julian looked up, calm as ever. "How'd it go?" "I told him the truth. The version he needed." Julian nodded. "That's all we can ever do." She stepped closer. "Do you ever feel strange? Being the one raising him?" He shook his head, walking over and wrapping his arms around her. "I don't need to be the one who made him. I just need to be the one who shows up, and I'm not going anywhere." She leaned into his chest, letting herself exhale, because the question had come, and the sky didn't fall. In fact, it opened something. A new kind of honesty between her and Leo. A new layer of trust. She once feared the day her son would ask about his father. Now, she saw it as a turning point. Not in how she defined Derek, but in how she defined herself. As a mother. As a protector. As someone who faced hard truths with grace and turned them into love. It had been nearly a decade since Ava last heard Derek's voice. She never tried to track him down. She didn't need to. After the court cases, the public fallout, and his fall from grace, Derek Sullivan had become a ghost in her story. And that was exactly how she liked it. Until the call came. She was in her office at Merrow's flagship studio in Soho, reviewing design proposals with her team. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello." Silence. Then a low voice. "Ava." She knew immediately. Her chest tightened, but her tone stayed calm. "Derek." "Hall." I wasn't sure if this number still worked." "It does." More silence. Then, slowly, carefully, he spoke. "I saw the feature in Architectural Digest, the house in the Berkshires. It's beautiful." Ava didn't thank him. She waited. "I'm not calling to reopen anything," he continued. "Why are you calling?" she asked, firm but not unkind. He sighed. "I'm sick, Ava." Her breath caught, not from sympathy, but surprise. "I have stage 4 liver failure. I'm on a donor list, but it's not looking good." A pause. "I've been in and out of rehab. I've lost everything. And just before it's too late, I needed to say something." Ava's hand trembled slightly, but she steadied it. "Say it." "I'm sorry." He let the words hang there, like they could change something. "I know it doesn't fix anything. I was cruel. I was selfish. I destroyed everything we had and I blamed you for it. I see that now. And I see what you've built, who you've become. And I needed you to know that I regret it all. Ava closed her eyes, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she had imagined this call so many times. Except in every version, she was angry, shouting, crying. But now she just felt free. Thank you, she said softly, for saying that. I don't expect forgiveness, he whispered. I'm not offering it, she replied. But I do hope you find peace. He hesitated, then asked the question she knew was coming. Is he okay? Ava's voice turned protective, solid. He's more than okay. He's happy, he's kind, he's loved, and he has everything he needs. Derek swallowed. Does he know about me? He knows what he needs to. The rest? That's for later if he chooses it. Silence again. Then, that's fair. Ava could hear the truth in his voice. He wasn't playing a game. He wasn't looking to return. He was just a man, at the end of his road, trying to close chapters the right way. I won't call again, he said finally. I know. She hung up first, then sat quietly, the hum of the city just outside the window, her reflection in the glass looking back with calm eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. Because closure doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it comes with a whisper from the past and the power to finally let it go. And in that moment, Ava knew. She hadn't just survived Derek. She had transcended him. And no apology could compare to the life she built without him. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Leo found the letter. He was 13, now taller than Ava ever imagined, with his mother's steady eyes and Julian's patient soul. It was the first rainy day of summer break, and he had asked to go through the old memory boxes in the attic. Ava had said yes, not thinking much of it. Most of the boxes were filled with Leo's childhood art, photos from design projects, and old books she hadn't read in years. But one box was different. It was the journal. The one she had written in every morning during her pregnancy, the same one that held the letter to her younger self, tucked between two faded ultrasound photos. When Leo walked into the living room with it in his hands, Ava felt her heart skip. Mom, he said carefully, can I read this? She looked into his eyes, curious. Open. Old enough now. Yeah, she said softly. You can. He sat beside her on the couch, legs crossed, the journal open on his lap. He read slowly, eyes scanning the page without rushing. Ava watched him, unsure whether to speak or let the words do their work. Minutes passed. Then, finally, Leo looked up. You wrote this? To yourself. She nodded. To the version of me that didn't know yet how strong she was. Leo's brow furrowed. Was that before? Everything? Right in the middle of it, she answered, when it hurt the most. He looked back at the page. You'll cry in quiet apartments and learn to hold your baby with one hand and your broken heart with the other. That part, he said quietly, that's me, isn't it? Ava smiled, tears forming. That's us. Leo was quiet again. Then he asked something she hadn't expected. Did you hate him? My real dad? She breathed in slowly. No, I pitied him. Then I healed. And now, I don't feel anything at all. He nodded. I think I get it. Ava tilted her head. How do you mean? I think. You forgave him without saying the words. You let go. That's harder than being angry forever. She blinked, speechless. Leo closed the journal gently. I'm glad you wrote this. Not just for you. For me too. It makes me proud. Proud. The word hit her heart like sunlight. She reached for his hand. One day, if you ever feel lost or hurt, or like you're not enough, I want you to read this again. Not because of what happened to me, but because of what's possible. Leo nodded. I think I'll write my own one day. Ava grinned. I'd like that. Later that night, she placed the journal back into the box, but this time, with a note taped to the cover. For Leo, when he needs it. She didn't know when he'd open it again. Maybe years from now. Maybe tomorrow. But she knew this. The letter that had once held her pain had now become something else entirely. A legacy. Not of suffering, but of strength passed on. Because healing doesn't end with one person. It echoes. And Ava had just watched her echo land softly into the hands of the future. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ava thought. Standing in the doorway of Leo's now empty bedroom. His posters still clung to the walls, his books lined up in perfect teenage disarray. But the bed was stripped, the closet half empty, the air strangely still. He had left for college that morning. NYU. Just 2 hours away, but still, it felt like a lifetime. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers across the wood Leo had once carved into with a pocket knife. L plus M equals MOM. He was 8 when he did it, said the M stood for mighty. She had laughed. Now, she cried, not from sadness but awe. She had raised him, loved him, protected him, and now she had let him go. Behind her, Julian stepped into the room. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside her, their hands finding each other easily, like puzzle pieces they'd never had to force. "We did it," he whispered. She nodded. "We did." That afternoon, they drove up to the Berkshires, to the cottage, their forever home. The garden was wild with late summer blooms, the air thick with cicada song. Ava kicked off her shoes and walked barefoot through the grass, trailing her fingers along the tall sunflowers Leo had helped her plant in spring. A box sat on the porch, an Amazon delivery. She smiled, recognizing the weight and feel of the package before even opening it. Inside, 3 new books. The one on top, "The Mountain Is You." She laughed softly. A gift she had pre-ordered for herself, a reminder that even now, there were new peaks to climb, new pieces of herself to uncover. That night, they ate dinner on the back deck. Candlelight flickering, the sky painted with stars. Julian poured wine. Ava made her famous lemon chicken. They didn't talk about the past, didn't dissect the wounds. They just were. Whole. Present. At peace. After dinner, Ava stepped into her studio, a space she hadn't touched since Leo started packing. The scent of cedar and ink filled her lungs, grounding her. She picked up her favorite Mont Blanc pen, opened a new journal, and began to write. "Dear Ava, this time, I'm not writing to save you. I'm writing to celebrate you." She smiled, her hand steady, the words flowing with ease. Outside, Julian lit the fire pit. Inside, she finished her letter with one final line. "You are no longer healing from the past. You are living your future. And it is radiant." The next morning, as dawn broke over the hills, Ava stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the world wake up. She wasn't waiting for the next chapter anymore. She was living it. No headlines, no scandals, no battles to win or men to survive. Just mornings like this, sunlight, peace, love that didn't need proving. And as the sky turned gold, Ava whispered to herself the words she wished someone had once told her. "You made it. Not just through the pain, but to the joy." So, the story has come to an end. And if you're still here, still watching, still listening, it means something in this journey touched your heart. Maybe not in a loud, dramatic way, but in that quiet, personal space where healing often begins. We've walked with Ava through betrayal, silence, strength, and finally peace. Her journey isn't just a story, it's a reflection of something deeper. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Ava's life didn't change because the world did, it changed because she did. If you're facing your own storm, remember this: you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the next right step, and then the next. So, what about you? What chapter are you writing next? If this story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Not just for us, but for the next person who might need this reminder. You can begin again, and it can be beautiful. We're so glad you're here. Let's keep healing together.